Welcome to This Explainer. I am so glad you're here because today we're unpacking an experience that is just deeply, profoundly isolating. We're dissecting the emotional and, believe it or not, the physical agony of being suddenly cut off by someone you care about. It's kind of this modern digital epidemic, right? But it actually has these ancient biological roots. And by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why a silent goodbye leaves such a massive, lasting impact.
So why does it hurt so much when someone you like suddenly stops talking to you without explanation? If you've ever experienced this, you already know the crushing emotional weight it carries, and I really want to validate you right out of the gate here. This isn't just a bruised ego. You are not overreacting. What we're dealing with is a profound psychological mystery that literally triggers your nervous system's deepest survival alarms.
Okay, let's dive into this. A participant in a recent psychological study by Leckford and colleagues said it perfectly. They said, "Even today, it still bugs me that I don't know why he ghosted me." Man, that just captures the pure, frustrating emotional reality of this whole thing. That lingering question of why. It's not just the loss of the person, it's the absolute, total absence of a reason. Let's look at how science explains this agony. Section 1. The agony of sudden silence. A psychological ambush. So here's our working definition of ghosting. The act of ending a relationship by ceasing communication without explanation. You know, technology and dating apps make it incredibly easy to just swipe or click someone entirely out of existence. But while it's super easy for the initiator, for you on the receiving end, this lack of resolution creates agonizing cognitive dissonance. It's a terrifyingly jarring shift. Your brain gets stuck in this painful gap between what you believed, that you were connecting, and what is suddenly true, which is that you've been entirely erased. According to researchers who study social ostracism, the brain process is being excluded in 3 temporal stages. First, you have the reflexive stage, which is that immediate, acute pain. Second is the reflective stage, where you're ruminating, trying desperately to figure out what went wrong. And finally, if the exclusion is chronic, you hit resignation, which brings depletion and depression. But here's the truly sinister thing about ghosting. Because there's no ending, no actual explanation to process, it traps your brain in a relentless loop between that painful reflexive stage and the obsessive reflective stage. You literally just cannot reach a resolution. Moving into Section 2, Rejection as Physical Pain, the Neuroscience of a Broken Heart. Now, what's really interesting about this information is the profound overlap between social pain and actual physical pain. When you're ignored, your brain's alarm systems, specifically the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or DACC, and the anterior insula, they create that sickening drop in your gut. But it goes even deeper. The AS2 and the DPINS are the sensory discriminative regions of the brain. Now, until recently, scientists thought these areas only activated when you experienced actual bodily harm, like touching a hot stove. But research shows that during high-intensity rejection, like an unexplained breakup, these exact physical pain regions light up. Your brain literally creates a somatic representation of a physical wound. So yeah, it quite literally hurts. And honestly, it gets worse because of a unique neurological trap. Think about it. If you break your arm, you can remember that it hurt, but you can't really re-experience the actual physical sensation of the bone breaking. Social pain is totally different. The dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, or DMPFC, processes our mental states. So when you're ghosted, the DMPFC allows you to vividly relive the social pain over and over again every time you mentalize the rejection. Every single time you wonder why, your brain re-triggers the actual physical pain response. It's wild. Section 3. The Torture of Ambiguity. Why silence is louder than no. Sudden silence is so devastating because it essentially assaults 4 fundamental human needs all at the exact same time. First, belonging. Your connection is severed, which makes you feel like a total outsider. Second, self-esteem. You internalize the blame, constantly wondering what you did wrong. Third, control. You have absolutely zero agency. It was a one-sided decision that you literally cannot respond to. And finally, meaningful existence. Being completely ignored just makes you feel invisible, almost like you don't even exist to this person. The target is left feeling utterly powerless. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark difference between direct rejection and ghosting. With direct rejection, even though it stings initially, emotional recovery is actually faster. You can drop the attachment because the finality is established. There's a clear reason. Ghosting, however, results in a much slower recovery. You sustain that interpersonal attachment because the ambiguity leaves this tiny, torturous sliver of hope alive, and it's paired with incredibly high confusion and rumination. This brings us to Section 4, the need for closure, desperate for an ending. Looking at the data from the LEC4 study, we can see exactly who hurts the most in these situations. As a person's natural need for clear, unambiguous answers increases, their psychological satisfaction absolutely plummets when they're ghosted. If you look at the downward-sloping trend for ghosted individuals, the data clearly shows that those of us who deeply crave closure suffer the most profound drops in our emotional stability. So the crucial point here is this concept, the ambiguity penalty. If you're someone whose brain naturally craves answers, patterns, and predictability, which, let's be honest, is most of us, then the ambiguity of ghosting is uniquely devastating. It's a massive psychological mismatch. Your brain is desperately searching for an answer that the other person is just completely refusing to provide. And finally, Section 5, finding your own ending, synthesis and recovery. First, we kind of have to understand this dynamic objectively. Research actually shows that for the person doing the ghosting, the initiator, they often view their silence as a distinct, definitive end. They're usually just avoiding the emotional discomfort or the conflict of a breakup. So to them, the relationship is entirely over, and they are largely unaware, or maybe just deeply in denial, about the agonizing limbo they've cast you into. The initiator's illusion is that silence is a clean break, when in reality, it's incredibly messy for the target. Let's move to and see how this builds our path forward. Because ultimate healing comes when silence stops being a mystery and starts becoming a boundary. The ghoster has denied you the cognitive process of understanding why, which means you have to provide it for yourself. Recovery requires you to stop trying to solve the puzzle of their silence and instead interpret the silence itself as the final, definitive answer. The silence is the boundary. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. We've seen today that the agonizing pain of being ghosted is deeply rooted in our biology. Your brain is literally just sounding an evolutionary alarm that a social tie has been severed. But you aren't just your biology. If the pain of silence is really just a biological alarm system, how will you choose to turn it off and write your own ending? You have the power to close the book that someone else left open. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you next time.